Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LEDS Global Partnership webinar. Today, we're going to be speaking about the unique case of scaling up solar energy in India. And we are lucky to have with us today two very important heroines in this case. The first, Mr. Patil, who is the Deputy Director of the Gujarat State Energy Development Agency in India. He's been with the development agency in Gujarat since 1985, working with renewable energy projects, including bioenergy, solar, and wind. He's been working for more than 30 years in renewable energy and policy, looking at policy formulation, implementation, and implementing power projects. He holds a Master in Agricultural Engineering with Energy specialization from the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. We also have my colleague, Dr. Manal Pathak, who's a professor at the Center for Environmental Planning and Technology University in India. The Center for Environmental Planning and Technology University offers undergraduate and postgraduate programs in natural and developed environment and human society and related disciplines. She has a combination of research and teaching experience for more than a decade on energy and climate change issues in India, authoring several publications, and collaborates frequently with the Earth Institute, Columbia University, UNEP DTU, ICLE, GIZ, and others. And she has also contributed to India's national communication to the UNFCCC. Some of her recent key reports include the Deep Decarbonization Pathways for India and the forthcoming second assessment report on climate change and cities. So, as you're aware, by 2013, India had an installed total of 1.4 gigawatts of solar, and impressively, over a gigawatt of that had been installed in Gujarat State alone. Today, we are going to advance the slides and take a look at a forthcoming case study of the LEDS Global Partnership, which will be released very soon, likely during this broadcast. And we appreciate you joining us here on the webinar. I think most of us are familiar with the mechanisms available to us here. Can't see my screen. How's this? Yeah, great. So I think most of us are still new. I seem to be not able to show my screen. There we go. Thank you. So this is the case study that will be released later today. And great. And getting on with it here, I think most of us are familiar with these webinar chat features. Today we are going to be using, I seem to be having some slide trouble. Can you confirm that you can see the slides? Great. Okay. Thank you. And we'll be using the question feature on the side there. And feel free during the presenters here to simply type in your questions directly. And we will then triage them and ask those questions at the end. And then conclude with a brief poll as well. The SubNational Integration Working Group now is impressively up to about 540 members worldwide. And this year, we've been producing other case studies in Africa, Latin America, continuing to publish some reports. And I think many of you are aware that the regional platform annual meetings are happening here in the next week in Asia, which will be hosted in Hanoi, and in Kigali, Rwanda, for the Africa LEDS platform as well. If you haven't yet signed up for the SubNational Integration Working Group, that's possible at ledsgp.org, where you will also find this recorded webinar and many other resources. But I encourage you to go ahead and sign up directly to receive mailings from the group. And you'll have access to many of the resources available there. One of the reports recently put out talks about the coordination and vertical integration of subnational climate actions and why this is so important. And I think you'll see many of those resonating very strongly with the Gujarat case study. Especially when we talk about the importance of accelerating the implementation of national strategies and development priorities. Not only is it responding to local values and local initiatives, but it really gives an opportunity to provide for co-benefit approach. There's also the issue, important issue here highlighted, of accelerating investments in infrastructure, in low-carbon infrastructure to the local level, something that we can all benefit from. Lastly, to call your attention, one of the reports right now that we're working on looks at a regional assessment at the country level of the vertical integration and coordination climate actions happening in Latin America and the Caribbean and the African platforms. And those both reports are in the pipe right now with different authors from those regions working on these this compilation. And I would invite anyone involved on this call who's active with multi-level governance activities related to climate actions to please go ahead and reach out, and we'd love to highlight some of the cases that you're working on. So with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to Dr. Manal, who will be taking the next presentation forward. Manal?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, and I hope we can see the slides as well.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Just one moment, please, while I get the presentation on. Okay, good. So good afternoon to everyone from India. And well, it's an honor to be presenting this case study with Mr. Patel. And thank you, Scott and Anna, for facilitating this. Well, it's a nice afternoon here in Gujarat. And for once, the sun isn't shining today. And we are happy because we are desperately awaiting monsoon here. But this case study is about the solar initiative in Gujarat. And as we go along, we'll discuss the case and some of the points that Scott had mentioned and how these have actually been implemented. So, well, Gujarat is a state in Western India. And as you can see on the figure on the right, that India has a very high solar potential, especially in the western and the southern part of the country. Gujarat has also an impressive history. We are an industrial state and contribute very highly to India's GDP. And well, most of, I think we have 10 months of very good solar radiation. So let me go further. So, well, India has a three-tier structure. The national policies are implemented at the subnational level. There's a feedback going from the subnational to the national. This is from our earlier work on green growth's best practice. Here, in the case of India, the programs at the national level are implemented at the state level. And this one talks, of course, in some cases, subnational governments take a leadership role, and within the overall ambit of the national policies, how they can initiate some of these green growth actions. And I'm reminded of the case of California, where the air quality targets were initiated actually in the state of California, and how it spilled over at the national level. And in Gujarat too, we have a very similar positive story to tell, and we are going to tell you the story. Just taking a look at the time. Yes, okay. So conventionally, national policies have a history of about 4 or 5 decades in India. Earlier, it was driven by the local energy needs, but in the last few decades, especially recently, the renewable energy push is driven more from the international agreements, especially the climate change, the Copenhagen summit, which led, right, the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which was announced in 2008, was just before the Copenhagen summit. And India uses the missions approach for implementation of the National Action Plan. And there were 8 submissions announced in India's National Action Plan on climate change. And these missions form the core of the plan. The National Solar Mission is an important mission focusing on mitigation and solar energy. The original target, actually, when it was announced in 2010, was to deliver 20 gigawatts of solar power. But now with the success at the national level, this target was recently revised to 100 gigawatt. Especially the INDC spells it out clearly on how ambitious we are about the solar power. And as you had seen, I'll go back to that slide, that we have a very impressive solar power capacity. We have a potential of 748 gigawatt, and well, 100 seems well ambitious, but well, we are hopeful. So the National Solar Mission had announced a phase-wise approach to achieving those targets. Most of it was supposed to be grid connected, and some decentralized applications as well. So I come to Gujarat State, and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy of India actually is the nodal ministry at the center, which announces policies and programs. And within this, the subnational governments, they have their own architecture and institutional structure, which is responsible for implementation of the national programs. And in the 1970s, in response to the global oil crisis, the national government promoted the formation of state-level institutions which would specifically implement some of these renewable energy programs. And well, you can see that the global impacts trickle down to the national level and reverberated at the state level. JEDA was actually the first nodal agency in India, and actually it was a model on which some of the other state agencies also were set up. And one of the, JEDA was formed, the high-level goal was to achieve energy self-sufficiency. So I'm starting and very quickly going over some of the initial programs of JEDA, and if someone's interested, maybe Mr. Patil can elaborate further, or you can even refer the case study where we have given details of these. I will quickly run past these. So earlier we started with decentralized applications, and there was a period of crisis where there was a problem with energy access, especially rural energy. And the population was growing. I think it had doubled since independence. Local biomass resources were coming under pressure, expansion in agriculture, and some of these things. Well, the focus had to be on some of the other alternate technologies and energies, and JEDA decided to focus on some of these decentralized applications, which became a huge success. And I have heard, or I'm told, although I was very young then, that this was JEDA office was actually called the solar cooker office because it was of this phenomenal success. So at one point, the state was selling about 50% of the solar cookers in the country, and there was a national program modeled after the JEDA program. And you can see in the slide that we had received so many awards. The state had received so many awards. There were some other applications because earlier lighting villages was actually dependent on kerosene, which is actually a petroleum fuel, and the subsidy burden on the government was increasing, and there were concerns about that. So there were these applications also, and village electrification was also a successful program implemented by JEDA. The solar applications grew larger. You can see some of these large-scale applications also happening as early as 1989. But also till then, wind was also picking up in a big way in Gujarat, and so was biomass. I will show the slides later. You can see some of these also. But so many of these programs were still decentralized, and I think in the 1990s, we started looking at renewable energy as getting into the grid, and it started with the first grid connected wind farms, and that actually paved the way of looking at renewable energy as a mainstream, something that could feed into the grid. But we were still having problems with the technology. The cost of these, especially solar panels, was very high at the time. So these discussions started since 2000, and Gujarat, well, in discussion with the private investors and some of the success of some of these programs, decided to formulate this policy after consultation. And it was also, of course, the first policy at the national level by a state that set out clear targets and incentives for investors willing to invest in solar energy. So this became a landmark event, I think, in India. And at that time, when it was announced, the capacity at the national level was very, very low. I think less than 20 megawatt. And right now it is, I think, 6,000 megawatt. And this was really at the early stages when the state decided to take the lead. At the time, the National Solar Mission was already announced. I mean, it was just formulated. In 2010, the National Solar Mission complemented the state solar policy. And we'll show you how this coordination actually resulted in so many of these successful initiatives. With the solar policy, also some other reforms were made, including the determination of tariff. And the state government consulted with several stakeholders, including the private players, on how they're going to implement this. There were booklets that were circulated among departments and agencies. Comments and suggestions were invited. So it was quite an inclusive process that really led to investors really being part of this policy-making process. And that's really one point that I'm willing to highlight here, that these initiatives were not really something that was driven by the government. It was really a two-way process of consultation and dialogue. And I'm going to go over, this is also an important thing, that there was a guarantee in the form of a power purchase agreement that the state government had outlined upfront, informing investors that, you know, there's some sort of, and this really gave the guarantee that yes, there is a certainty about this policy. And there was a lot of interest around that time of getting into this, and I will show you some of the, we do not have time to get into all the details of all the initiatives, but so today I'm going to highlight three of the more important, more landmark projects or programs within this policy that were successful, and probably why. I will also, I think Anna mentioned it upfront, but if you have questions, keep them on hold and we'll get back to you very shortly. So Gujarat has high potential. We have a lot of wasteland, you can see in the map. So the state government decided, let's look at something, let's try and tap into this economies of scale. A large tract of wasteland was identified. It was sort of seen as a win-win proposal. At that time, it was looked at as a very ambitious project, and there were people who were not convinced and thought it would not succeed, but it has succeeded in a big way. This land that was identified, it was decided that we will invite private players to set up their projects here. The benefit to the players would be develop land. You see, land is a big issue in a country like India. And land acquisition leads to, I'm sure it is in other countries as well, especially developing countries. And land acquisition poses a major hurdle to private investors. So the state government said, hello, wait, so we will give you the developed land. We'll lay out the infrastructure, and please come and set this up. It was, yeah, it sounds a little simple, and I don't think I intend to oversimplify this, but it really worked that way. And I think the projects were up and running in less than a year and a half, which is a remarkable success. So they started these discussions, and everything started in 2010, and by 2012 you had about over 200 megawatts already commissioned on this land, which was completely barren. And let me go to the next slide. This is what it looks like now, and impressive with the connectivity, the infrastructure, and it has generated a lot of local jobs. So, well, some of the highlights of this project. There was some international assistance in laying down the transmission infrastructure. ADB provided a soft loan to the government of Gujarat, and well, there was a certainty to the investors because of the power purchase agreement. There was land, so there was a lot of interest, and a number of investors showed. I think you have about 100 private players already showing interest in expanding this. This project led to replication in other states in similar ways, especially in Rajasthan, where large solar parks. But at that time, when this plant was commissioned in Charanka, Gujarat, there weren't. It was Asia's largest solar park. And following that, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy India also announced a scheme for the development of solar power parks in India. And this is a Google image. And it has benefited the local population in terms of unskilled and semi-skilled jobs. And of course, it is clean energy. It has led to avoided emissions from coal, because you know, India's energy mix is still largely dominated by coal. And these little dents have really helped increase the solar and the renewable energy, solar into the energy mix of India. The next project I want to showcase is Canal Solar Power Project. This is again, I found this interesting and worth discussing, because this is on top of a canal. You can see in the image. It was the first ever solar power plant on a canal in India. And well, I'm told that somebody from a high-level government official was walking along and saw this potential, that why don't we do this? And suddenly the whole machinery got into action and said, yes, we can do this. And so this was contracted out to a private player, and this is what it is. So it was supposed to be a test project of 1 megawatt. In fact, being a teacher, I was even discussing in class, and we were just thinking it would end up as a pilot project, but no, it didn't. It led to another 10 megawatt project in the state within a span of 2 years. And we know now that many other states are planning such projects. And it has gone at the national level as an announcement by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. But one important, or these points that I'm highlighting, is the multiple benefits, because in developing countries, investments over climate action sometimes become difficult because these are not part of national priorities. And so if you highlight the development of if these projects enable development, enable jobs, then they can be fast-tracked. And that's what happened in this case. That one was that there was no need for additional land. You can see in the picture also that it was on the canal, and this was readily available. And it led to other co-benefits, like it avoided evaporation of water. So in a land-scarce, water-scarce region, it was seen as a real blessing, and it has worked very well. And if some of you are planning to visit Gujarat, please do make it a point to visit this place. It's really an interesting project. And the third one, and I think I'm a bit behind on time, and the third one was the rental roof. This is a classic rooftop policy project, and it was on a PPP, based on a PPP model. It was interesting because for the private investor, there was economies of scale through the program, that they could access many rooftops. So the way it works, I will just go to the, the way it works is that if I own a rooftop, the private investor can use my rooftop and set up the solar panel. I get cheap electricity, they get the rooftop space, and that's how green electricity gets fed into the grid. So, well, the benefits to homeowners are that, well, there's almost no risk, and I get cheap power, and the private guys, well, they do not have to hunt around looking for a place to set up the solar machinery. So, well, this was a huge success. It was piloted in the city of Gandhinagar, which is also the capital of Gujarat State. And it has already been installed on over 500 households and government offices. And, well, immediately it led to replication, because there was a clear business case here. And 5 other cities in Gujarat already are on it. I think we have about 25 megawatts already commissioned here. And this now, the latest on this is that the national capital is planning to adopt this model, and that will be a big scale up, because that will enable wide scale replication in the country also. we now have a solar policy, a revised solar policy, because the earlier solar policy was till 2014, and now we have a new policy which specifies the incentives and net metering, and it's much more clear, and it goes till 2020, and we hope this will actually scale up, because there was a bit of a lull since 2014, and now that the new policy is announced, I am told that the state government is excited about taking this, because we'll go to the next slides, and I think India still has a long way to go, so we can celebrate the success, but there's still a steep curve to climb, and such clear policies and incentives will help to achieve those targets. So very quickly to go over this, I've highlighted the box that I would like to focus on, that this between 2002, in a span of 10 years, how the renewable energy has scaled up to 20%. A lot of it is wind also, and I think these policies at the state level did help to jumpstart these projects. So I have reiterated some of this, but you can see that the second bullet there, that in 2013 India had 1400 megawatts, and 1000 of this was already in Gujarat. So now, because then other states picked up, so now the share of Gujarat obviously is not over 50%, but it's still an impressive share. And Gujarat was really catalyzing this, and now it's sort of playing a supportive role. And I'm also told that there was a very good coordination with the center, in the sense that the MNRE subsidies were channeled through JEDA for these projects, but also MNRE was receiving feedback of the successful implementation of solar projects in Gujarat, and these were these helped to catalyze the national policy. These fed into the policy making process at the center, and I think, it would be, I don't know if it would be too bold to say that it was really the efforts at the state level that led to the ambitious targets at the center, the recent ones also. So, well, these are some of the statistics, and comparing Gujarat with the other state, we still stand out in terms of the solar installed capacity here. The case goes into a lot of detail about what worked and what didn't work, and I think we can answer some of your questions on these specific numbers regarding the subsidies provided and all that. I think what worked in the case of Gujarat was really the policy framework, and the policy sort of brought the state agencies and departments towards a common goal, which was also a common goal with the center. And you had the Electricity Regulatory Commission that determined the tariffs, you had the land acquisition, you had the people who were laying around the infrastructure. So all of these agencies, the distribution company, all coming together because there was an overarching umbrella of the state policy. And also the National Solar Mission and the state targets were aligned. And it was really the national-state coordination that led to this phenomenal success, from 20 megawatts to 6,000. The policy also made an important contribution to reducing, the uncertainty among the investors. And one of the success factors was also because the distribution companies and the state had a reputation, a good reputation about delivering projects, and that really, it had good credit worthiness, and that's also one of the reasons why the private investors were not very hesitant, and they just jumped in as soon as the policy was announced. You could see that about 1,000 megawatts was installed in the first 3 years after the policy was announced. Another thing was, speeding up these clearances. That land acquisition was a major hurdle, and the state government saw that. Sorry, I'm just getting a message. Okay. The state government saw that this could present a potential hurdle for the investors, and we should do something to ease that. And I think one of the initiatives, especially with the Charanka solar park, was to develop land to the private investors who could really just start working on it. And there was also clear communication. I was interviewing, as part of this case study, some of these solar companies which have set up projects in Gandhinagar. And they were actually telling us that because we had clear guidelines, we trusted the people in JEDA, we trusted the people in the Energy Regulatory Commission, we trusted some of these guys who were talking to us directly, the Energy Minister and the Secretary. and they were well calling for regular meetings. And it was because of this coordination with the stakeholders that really is, some of these numbers jumped up. And Gujarat now has a history of several firsts. The solar park, the first of its kind in India, led to the several solar parks in the country. The Gujarat State solar policy, the Gandhinagar rooftop park. So you can see some of these projects looking at replicating in several other cities and states also. So very quickly to look at India's numbers. And I have mentioned this also. This you can see the red line is showing the numbers on the tariff. You can see how it has dropped per kilowatt hour from 0.39, or in India it was, I think, 20 rupees a kilowatt hour, and it has gone down to 0.07 now. And we are looking at grid parity before the national target. So the National Solar Mission had announced a goal that we should reach grid parity by 2022, but it looks like we may end up achieving those national goals before time. And you can see how impressive this is. In fact, I think the recent number we have crossed 6,000. And well, India's INDC ambitiously has announced that we will go to 100 gigawatts of solar capacity, and there's also funding, and this has really excited some of the investors, thinking that, well, India is going to be a large market. But one more point that Scott has already mentioned, and I have through some of these cases, is that there was several of these projects had delivered co-benefits of development, whether in terms of local area development, whether in terms of establishing technologies. Some of these rooftop panels were installed in hospitals and universities, and I think one of the projects at the civil hospital in Ahmedabad, which was actually installed with the support of the National Ministry, MNRE subsidy, as well as JEDA support, actually ended up with a lot of energy savings, so it's cut down costs, and so green energy has come into the grid in a big way because of these rooftop programs. And now I'm actually thinking of installing rooftop panels, solar panels at my place. I haven't been able to do that. And this is just my concluding slide before I hand it over to Mr. Patil. And UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was very impressed with the Canal rooftop installation, and this is what he said, that I saw more than glittering panels. I saw the future of India and the future of the world. So I think that pretty much sums it up. We have a lot of detail actually to go into, and please do read the case. But I'm going to transfer this to Mr. Patil, who can make a few additional comments, because he's really from the implementation side, and I think he may have some other interesting stories to tell. Not so much about the climate and the national subnational coordination, but I'm sure he can add to what I have said. Maybe he can make some quick comments for another 5-7 minutes, and then we can initiate the question, answer, and discussion. I'm happy to hear if there are people from other countries, if you want to share your experience, or you want to comment, or maybe if you have questions. Mr. Patil, are you online?
Yes, I am online.
Okay, maybe you can take over. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Meenal Pathak. Good afternoon to all. I think Dr. Pathak has very aptly covered the entire spectrum of the developments that are happening in the state of Gujarat. To add a few to what she has said, that Gujarat has always been a land of opportunity, especially in terms of renewable sources of energy, because of its strategic location on the sea coast, and it has a long sea coast of 1600 kilometers, posing very good wind speeds along the coast as well as many inland areas, which gives a potential of more than 35,000 megawatt to the state of Gujarat. Similarly, the sunshine is also very good in this part of the country, and even if you set aside just say 0.1% of the total landmass of Gujarat, we could see an installed capacity of over 10,000 megawatt. And in practice, this 0.1% could be much more than the land that can be made available. So we are talking of more than 20-30,000 megawatts of solar power plants as well. Gujarat, as I said, it's a land of opportunity, and similarly, the government here is also quite committed for the development of renewable sources of energy. Right from the 1970s, even when the central government had not thought of renewable energy, our visionary leadership and visionary people had set up this agency to develop alternate sources of energy, and that's the result that all these developments that we see today in the country have been these seeds of that were sown in the state of Gujarat well back in 1979, and since then our journey continues to see that the climate change threats, those are posed because of the global warming, are arrested by various mitigation measures, be it wind energy, solar energy, biomass energy, and even for that matter energy conservation, which is also close to our heart. And in the right perspective, therefore, given the commitment of the government, perhaps it was the first state in the Asian subcontinent region to have a full-fledged climate change department set up in the state of Gujarat, who looks after all these adaptation and mitigation programs and how to help the nation in saving from the threats of the climate change. I think Dr. Meenal has covered the entire spectrum, but just to add few that besides solar energy, we also have a very good program on wind energy, and perhaps Asia's first largest demonstration wind farm of 10 megawatt was set up way back in 1988-89. And as a result of that, the successful operation and economical and technical feasibility of that led to the first ever private sector partnership policy to be floated in the state of Gujarat in 1993, and as a result of that, today we see that about 4,000 megawatt of wind energy is functional, and we have policies even now where the private people are allowed to set up wind farms and use the energy for themselves, either for the captive use, or they also have an option for selling the electricity to the state electricity boards at a preferential tariff. Those are decided by the regulators, the electricity regulator in the state. As rightly said by Dr. Meenal, that there was a time when almost 100% of the solar capacity in the country was that from Gujarat. It was because of the visionary leadership that the state of Gujarat had in 2009-10. The present Honorable Prime Minister, who was then the Chief Minister, he has a conviction of developing solar energy, and that's the reason why way back in 2009, when nobody thought of a megawatt scale of solar power plant, he decided that we should go ahead and implement this on a large scale. And as a result of that, I would say that had that not step been taken in 2009, the prices that we are seeing today would have reached this level. I think over the last couple of, since 4 or 5 years, the prices of solar in India have fallen down by at least 1/3. We were talking about $3 million a megawatt then in 2009, which is a little close to $1 million. Similarly, the cost of generations therefore also have gone down, and the time has come when the grid, we have reached a grid parity. As a matter of fact, the industrial and commercial applications, or the users of the industrial and commercial electricity, they find it installing solar power more cheaper than drawing the power from the grid. So that is also a commitment of the state government, and as a matter of fact, the state is mandated to purchase only say about 1.75% of its total energy needs. However, since last 3 years, we have always overachieved, and we are purchasing more than about 2% of the total energy from solar energy, and wind energy we are purchasing at least more than 10%. So that's the commitment that the state of Gujarat has, and be it any program, we has always been the leader, always the innovator, be it terms of solar, small canal-based power plants replicated to a 10 megawatt power plant. We also have various schemes for promoting farmers and helping farmers in irrigation. The farmers can set up solar pumps, and during the time when they don't use the electricity, they can feed back to the electricity, which can be purchased by the distribution companies at preferential rates. So this journey continues, and we have presented various models which are, in fact we have paved the way for all the other states to follow, and as a result of that we see a 6 gigawatt of installed solar capacity today, and a total renewable capacity of more than about 27,000 megawatt, that is about close to 27 gigawatt. which is about 20% of the total renewable energy in the country. So this all these efforts, besides implementation of the program, our main mandate is also to create awareness amongst the various groups of people, including the school children, who we see as the future generation, who are going to be most important for judicious use of energy. So we have very major program wherein we train more than 50,000 students every year and explain to them, and through them run various programs of starting from their energy saving in the school, in the home, the need of importance and the use of renewable energy, so that right from their earlier childhood they know the importance of the energy, and they should know that why we should use energy judiciously and why we should use alternate sources of energy. I think this journey is a very tough journey also, especially in the context of Gujarat, because unlike the many other states in the government of in the Indian country, this part of the state is very rich in power sector. It has provided electricity to the entire state.
Minal, I believe we've lost Mr. Patil.
Hello.
But perhaps, hi
Yeah.
Minal, unfortunately, I think
Yeah.
Mr. Patil has cut out.
Um, no problem. What we can do is we can wait for a few seconds and maybe we can take questions. Do we have questions?
Yes, let me go ahead and feed you some questions.
Right.
Perhaps this is related. Perhaps this is related to the cloudy day in Gujarat and no electricity.
No, I don't
Um,
know, but it just gets slow sometimes.
yeah, Mr. Patil, have you rejoined us?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
Okay,
please
good.
go ahead and continue.
Well, I thought I had lost the audio connection. I just concluded and I said that this journey of Gujarat continues in combating the threats of the climate change by various mitigation measures, be it solar, wind, biomass, and various other training modules to educate the people and to impart the message of the need of adopting the renewable sources of energy. With that, I close my comments here. Thank you so much, and I would be glad to answer any questions that any one of you have. Thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Patil, thank you for joining us today and
You're
sharing
welcome.
this tremendous success. It's inspirational, and there are many lessons learned. And thankfully, this case study we will be able to study more closely to help replicate the success in other countries. Some of the question, my first question is that, Mr. Patel, was this a surprise to you? Was the speed and the success of these policies a surprise to the agencies?
No, actually it isn't a surprise because it was very well known that we are jumping into a task which is an uphill task, and everything was known since 1979 when this agency was set up and when I joined in 1985. So from 1985 until almost 2008 we were working only on kilowatt scale projects. But this visionary leader who guided us, the Chief Minister, the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, he's an ardent supporter and staunch supporter of renewable energy. So we weren't surprised. We knew that he always takes up challenging tasks and sees that they are achieved in time, well in time. So it wasn't a surprise at all.
Were there unanticipated technical challenges, or if you could speak a little bit to the challenges with transmission and distribution during the time of the dramatic increases in renewable energy into the grid? How was that transmission and distribution managed? And also, what's the relationship with the neighboring states? Was that electricity freely circulated across the national grid? How was that demand managed?
Well, yes, there were challenges, but the initial challenges were not related to the transmission. The initial challenges is in 2009-10 when we announced the policy was that of the finances. Not a single financial institution was ready to finance any of these solar projects because they were not sure whether it's going to run, whether the claims those are going, the claims which are being made, whether they would be true, whether that generation of 1.6 million units per megawatt per year would really happen, whether their money is safeguarded, whether they would get back the money. So the main challenges was to bring together the financial institutions, take them around few projects, those we had set up as demonstration project of 1 megawatt scale, them build up the confidence, show them around, bring their big bosses, show them the technology, show them the generation. So as a matter of fact, that was a great challenge, and that time we also took the help of the Asian Development Bank in organizing various seminars within the state and involving the topmost authorities of the government in pushing this ahead. But as far as the transmission and other electrical challenges were concerned, since we have been experienced the wind program since 1993, the solar program is almost similar to that of wind, except for that the wind generates over the 24 hours and solar generates only during the day hours. So the transmission network and the distribution network as well are very robust in the state of Gujarat. So per se, there weren't any challenges as far as the evacuation of the solar power is concerned. We have substations of 650 kV, 220 kV, 400 kV across the state at many places. In each of the county, more than 10 substations are there in each of the county. So per se, there weren't any challenges as far as the transmission is concerned. As far as the interstate transmission is concerned, there are few central transmission utilities, but that stage has not yet reached because the entire power was adequately evacuated by the state grid itself.
That's great to bring up finance. You mentioned that I believe it was the Asian Development Bank helped support some of the early finance and directly to the state. So including the early wind projects, was it a challenge to link international finance to the state level projects? Did that have to flow through national government? Did that have a sovereign guarantee? How did that international finance reach the state level?
As far as wind energy is concerned, as I said, we began in almost 85. That time the central ministry, which was then the Department of Non-Conventional Sources of Energy, they had tied up with the Danish government, and under the Danish International Development Agency, the technology was given free of cost. I mean, the wind turbine generators, they were provided free of cost for the initial about 10 to 15 megawatt of projects, and we were to deploy local resources for land, the transmission, which was very meager compared to the total cost of the project. So that time it wasn't much an issue. But as far as solar is concerned, the ADB had helped in only the solar ka Charan Park, where this 500 megawatt park was to be set up. And because ADB funded that project, so the other financial institutions that helped the other financial institutions to build up their confidence. But that wasn't difficult because, and it was through the central government that time as well.
Great. Has that led to other industries in the state, such as the production of solar panels themselves?
Well, yeah, at least there are at least 8 to 10 number of people who have set up manufacturing of solar modules here. where they import the solar cells either from China or USA or other countries, and the module manufacturing is being done in the state and in the country also. Large public sectors as well as private sectors have set up solar panels manufacturing. But the fact that the Chinese prices are low compared to the Indian market, so all these projects of 1 gigawatt which happened during 2010 to 12, most of them had imported panels because they were cheap compared to the Indian panels then. And that time the Indian manufacturing capacity was also not to that capacity that it could supply. But the major issue was that of the cost.
Yeah, can I just add, I think Scott has raised a very important question, and I think the rosy picture of Gujarat that we showcased, I do see this as a challenge. The challenge that the idea of domestic manufacturing, and it's important to India that we do, I mean, we should find ways to. In fact, recently the national government has initiated the Make in India program, which is actually to give a spur to the domestic manufacturing. But yes, the challenge of, you can deploy renewable energy, but we still need that level of indigenous manufacturing, and that has not happened.
And then lastly, Minal and Mr. Patil, if you could describe, are there plans for more aggressive links with the transportation industry? Is there a direct conversation happening about electrifying the transportation system in Gujarat?
Not on a very large scale, but we did try the battery operated vehicles within the capital city of Gandhinagar, and that too within the secretariat, where we have set up a 50 kilowatt of solar generation plant which charges the batteries for the buses, which was successfully operated, and now we intend to take up that project and link the twin cities of Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar by applying about 10 buses with the help of solar charging. But other than this, as far as transportation is concerned, other initiatives I think they are not yet taken.
Yeah, well, also just my 2 cents on this. We've recently co-authored an electric vehicle paper for India, which is scenarios for electric vehicles in India, and sort of, I'm not advertising it, but it's a UNEP report. Electric vehicles have very huge potential in India, given that we have so many two-wheelers. And if we see electric vehicles as a transition technology, and if we could get that scale of solar, then Scott, really your comment on how much we could get into clean energy and how we could actually deliver our INDC commitments is, yes, there is a huge potential. Perhaps I think with Mr. Mr. Patil talking about JEDA's recent initiatives, I think maybe when we rewrite or rework on the case and update it, we might have a new case study on how transportation and solar panels or rooftop programs have been interlinked and how we have, or Gujarat has pioneered. Because I see, since I've been following this for the last 5-7 years, the solar story in Gujarat, there have been many firsts, and we hope this could be also one of the firsts that Gujarat could initiate.
Absolutely. Gujarat, we have high expectations now for continued achievement and leadership. So that's all the questions I have, Mr. Patil, Minal. Mr. Patil, would you like to make any concluding remarks?
Well, what you said, that your expectations from Gujarat are well said, and we are striving to fulfill all the expectations and the target set by the central government. For that, we have a new policy now, which Minal mentioned about, the solar policy. Within the next couple of days, we are expecting a new wind power policy, which is lapsing this month. So, with these policies, which are investment friendly and very little bureaucratic approach in the state of Gujarat, I am sure that we'll be able to keep up with the targets and fulfill them in time.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to jump into a very quick poll here. If you could go ahead and share some feedback to help us improve our delivery next time. In the meantime, I would also remind you that this webinar is being recorded. You can access this at the ledsgp.org, and there you'll be able to pull the case study as soon as it's published. And one quick question, Manal. Could you share the link to UNEP's report that you mentioned?
Shall I share it during this webinar itself?
You can type it into the chat. You can drop the link directly into the chat feature.
Just hold on then. I will have to get to the link. Yes. Meanwhile, I see some polling going on.
Yes, yes. I will move to the next question here.
Okay, I have the link here, and okay, there's a PDF link to the report. And that's really more about the electric vehicles and not so much about, but you can have a look. And since then, we've also published in one of the very reputed journals, the Journal of Clean Air Production, and maybe I can share that link as well. That was an updated version of this report. I don't know if it's downloadable for everyone, but let's see. Did you get the link?
I don't think you've dropped it into the chat feature yet.
I did.
Is it marked all audience?
I get a response from Anna saying yes, it's available.
Yep.
So
Yep, we
yes.
got it. Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, so thank you to the audience and thank you everyone.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thank you, all of you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.